Regency Printing, 789-6683. That's 789-6683. Regency Printing.
Keep up with what's going on in the downtown area with Ocala Downtown Newspaper. Delivering thousands of newspapers to businesses in the downtown area, Ocala Downtown is there to keep you informed. They even have Tom's Picks, a free referral for people who are looking for a company to do work for them. Tom's Picks will refer the company that fits your needs, and all we ask in return is that you tell them where you heard about it. It's simple. For more info, just call Tom's Picks, 352-804-1223, and pick up your copy of the Downtown Ocala newspaper today.
And now read Ocala Downtown Newspaper online.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to AM Ocala Live, WOCA, The Source, 96.3 FM, 1370 AM, as we are now 10 minutes past the top of the 10 o'clock hour. 1 hour left to go with here the show at AM Ocala Live. We are streaming live to YouTube, YouTube Live, WOCA, The Source Radio. As we're moving on here, I still have in the studio with us Lena Williams, as we talked about before the top of the hour. As we have her in here for community events, but, you know, in lieu of the pandemic and the idea of events, we all know that they're canceled or postponed as such, but the event becomes dealing with the pandemic and still doing what we can within the community to give back a little bit and help others during this time that may need it too. So we appreciate that, and she's going to hang with us here as she's done last couple weeks, which I really thank. As now we're going to move on to On This Date in History, our little segment that we've been doing here lately that's been a little bit interesting, and a little shout out to Tish who gets this ready for me. In the idea of this being the 13th of April, we're going to go far back as 1943 and all the way to 1997. As we start, that car alarm in the background there. I hope they don't hear it. Yeah. They probably don't, because most people say they can't hear it, but I can. This one's a little interesting here. Going back to 1943, it was on this date in history, 1943, April 13th, 1943. It says Alcatraz attempted escape. It says 4 convicts attempted to escape from the prison of Alcatraz on this day. It says 2 were drowned in San Francisco Bay after being shot, and the other 2 were recaptured. And we know Alcatraz as the Rock over in San Francisco, as Alcatraz Island and everything else. What's interesting about this was 1943. It was decommissioned, I think, 20, 30 years later or something like that?
Yeah, it is. Now it's a tourism site. Have you ever been?
I have not. I lived in the Bay Area for about a year or so, but I'd never had a chance to get out there. I had a few times plans to, and it fell through. It was really cool. Yeah. It
was eerie. The thing I remember most is I got seasick on the ride over. Yeah, it was that water. I would not be diving into it. You must have really wanted to escape if you thought to yourself you're going to take a swim in that.
That's what they said. The temperature of the water being so cool, hypothermia can set in, and it's not exactly a hot tropical area, San Francisco.
No, miserable.
It's wet and chilly. But what's interesting about this, I don't know if it was this that spawned the screenplay for the movie of Escape from Alcatraz with Clint Eastwood.
Probably.
A little shout out to Carlos. Clint Eastwood, Carlos, you remember Clint Eastwood? Because he actually didn't know who it was. But that was one of my favorite movies growing up. Their Clint Eastwood movie was Escape from Alcatraz. Mm-hmm. And it's it's pretty unique how it all played out. But he just chiseled it away for days upon days around and made a paper mache head to fill when it was ready to.
Yeah, they have that in Alcatraz. They have a model of the paper mache head, and they have it set up. You can walk all through. It was cold and damp in there, and that was the thing that stood out to me the most about it. But I'll tell you, it's a fortress.
Yeah. Yeah,
I can't imagine chiseling my way out of there, Count of Monte Cristo style.
Yeah, and like you said, it's damp and cold, and that I guess people after a while. Moving on, within the same year, on the same date, it was the Jefferson Memorial. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt dedicated the Thomas Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., dedicated to Thomas Jefferson, an American founding father and the third president of the United States. So it was the Jefferson Memorial.
It's beautiful, too.
Yeah, it really is.
There.
I need to go back to Washington, D.C. I was in fourth grade, I think, when I went. Yeah, and deep down, I know that that's a trip that's going to be coming up here soon once this stuff's lifted within the time. Between the Jefferson Memorial, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, those ones do stand out.
I love the Vietnam Memorial when I'm there, and the Library of Congress is just the greatest.
When you mentioned the Vietnam Memorial, I had gone to that, but being so young, I didn't understand any concepts.
You don't feel the weight in the same way.
No, and that's one of the things I really want to. That's probably one of the first things I'll do when I go, is that one in particular, and that's because, like you said, the weight of it. And now, as just a little segue shout out to, as we do here at the station on Thursdays, Vets Helping Vets, as we do Veterans News, just. Working at the retirement community, doing the bartending gig like I was, those are the generation of folks that are retiring now, are the ones who were drafted. And, serving with them, talking with them, and hearing some of the stories and all that, they were proud to serve, but they weren't always appreciated that way.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating nonetheless. But it was on this date, 1943, Jefferson Memorial. As I could have talked more about Thomas Jefferson, considering it was his memorial, but
he's awesome.
Yeah,
we can talk about Jefferson.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of conversation; it goes in other directions. But moving on, it was on this date in history, April 13th, 1949. It was 1949 that the Germany Nuremberg trials ended. 19 top aides to Adolf Hitler receiving up to 25 years for their part in the war crimes against humanity. That's what movie was that? The Schindler's List that brings about all that. So it was actually on this date in 1949 that had ended, giving them with the sentencing of more than 19 for aides to Adolf Hitler, up to 25 years for their part in the war crimes against humanity, which a lot of, I think, what was it? There's something, this was a few years ago, I saw some documentary or something. There's actually quite a few people, so it would be on this date in 1949 in the state in history, that a lot of people thought 25 years, that's it. There's like a lot of controversy into, no, it should be, they should be suffered the same way with the crimes against the humanity that they did. That
was one of the things, though, that makes the Nuremberg trials so important historically, is that, it gives that debate airtime.
Yeah.
It made all of these things public. It put them into the record. It made it undeniable.
Yeah.
It really is important that these things be documented in such a detailed, thoughtful, thorough way, because then we can have those debates even now, moving into the present time. Was it handled appropriately? Were the sentences appropriate? This idea even, it kind of gives wake to, is just following orders an excuse? Right. So there's a lot to talk about.
And like you said, I think that's a great way you put it, because in some circumstances, and this is school, history has a way of repeating itself. So if this stuff is documented, there's a way to maybe loophole our minds to say, this isn't right. Look how it happened here, and here's how it was handled, and maybe there's a way we can continue to handle the same way or adjust.
You know, South Africa, even in the ending of apartheid with the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, learning that lesson and entering all of that into the public record is a way of kind of healing a nation after what was a vicious civil war, you know, and that was in late 90s, early 2000s that they're doing that.
Yeah,
so.
Awesome. Yeah, good point. Excellent. Moving on, a little lighter note. It was on this date, April 13th, 1954. It was just, this is pretty cool because this just, was it last week? Yeah, I think it was last week, one of those days. I brought him up in history because it was on the date that was something special. But this is about 1954 with Hank Aaron in his first Major League Baseball appearance. Hank Aaron makes his first appearance with the Milwaukee Braves with the number 5 on his uniform. But what's fascinating about this, that was April 13th, and we were talking just last week that it was in this month that he went on to break the legendary Babe Ruth record of Major League Baseball home runs. And it was just, I think, last week that then here, 1954, obviously with him starting the baseball season like it does in April, his first Major League Baseball appearance was here in April, Hank Aaron. And then it was last week in history, and now I'm drawing a blank on the year. I want to say 1970? No, it was farther than that. But anyway, it ended up breaking the Babe Ruth all-time home run record.
Wow.
Which is absolutely incredible. Those are one of those moments, and I was talking to Galen this morning. He's about the only one I can talk sports with a little bit. But that's one of those things that in sports history, something like baseball in itself sets itself in America's history, and is what makes it our pastime. And what's phenomenal about it is how everybody knows of Babe Ruth if you know baseball, and even if you don't, he's still mentioned just because of the era in which he played,
Babe
right?
Ruth, yeah.
The great Bambino. But to have this guy break the record it is absolutely incredible. It just shows you how many home runs he had to hit, and not only that, he was a black man, which is incredible. And
it was a different game back then too than it is nowadays. You know?
And I was going to say, I know you're into movies a little bit, but have you ever seen or heard of the movie The Sandlot?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so I love that movie because it's a play on being a kid and being a fan of baseball.
Yeah.
And when Benny Rodriguez has his dream, Babe Ruth comes through the closet door to tell the kid that he needs to do what he needs to do to go get the baseball. But he reaches over and he sees a baseball card of Henry Aaron.
Yeah.
And he goes, I don't know why, kid, but can I have this? As the homage to saying Hank Aaron is going to be the one who breaks his all-time home run record. So 1954 on this date, Hank Aaron's first Major League Baseball appearance. Moving on to 1957. It was April 13th, 1957. Miss Marilyn Monroe has checkup and speculation and restarts the speculation that she may be pregnant. Oh, interesting. So Marilyn Monroe has a checkup and then speculation restarts that she may be pregnant. That was in 1957. That was the gossip back then, right?
Yeah.
1957. I'm like, Marilyn Monroe?
Well, there was a lot of gossip surrounding her.
Yeah, a lot of coffee talk. Is she having a baby? Is she not? I don't know. I'm just thinking about it. I'm a little bit verklempt, you know? So that was the... what do you call those things when you're looking at the magazines on your way to the checkout line?
Yeah,
that kind of tabloid kind of stuff. Moving on to 1964. I'll make sure I see some of these names right. I know who he is and I can hear it in my mind, but I guess I'll make sure I say it right. It was 1964, April 13th, 1964. Sidney Poitier, as I say right? Mm-hmm. Sidney Poitier becomes the first black actor to win the coveted Best Actor award at the Oscars for his role in Lilies of the Field.
Wow. So
it was Sidney Poitier becomes the first black actor to win Best Academy Award for Best Actor. Wins his Oscar. It was 1964 on this date. Yeah, because they used to hold the Academy Awards farther in the year. But now it's been February for many years, but it used to be a little bit later on. But Sidney Poitier, and I think it was a few years ago they had mentioned of something special with that again, because had an amazing career. Moving on to 1976, as we're just about 5 minutes before the bottom of the hour. 1976, April 13th, 1976. It says the USA here is a $2 bill issued nationwide, with the portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the front and John Trumbull's portrait of the Declaration on the back. It says banks experienced long QUEs of the collectors who believed that the bills would appreciate in value.
Yeah.
You've ever had a $2 bill?
No, I haven't.
No.
I've never been a big collector of that kind of stuff, and you got to go out of your way to get one. So.
That's true, but they're more often than you think, and every now and then you come across one, you're like, what's this?
But Jefferson is my favorite founding father.
He is, right? We were talking about that the other day. So that's 2 mentions of him today. And I bet you part of the reason that it was issued on that date in 1976 is because the memorial was probably on that date in, like we said, 1943.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he was. Now, what makes him one of your favorites?
Well, I just think that the Declaration of Independence is this pivotal moment, and then he was a great and interesting president. He had really interesting foreign policy views. He was just a very smart, very thoughtful, kind of prescient guy. He understood. He wrote the words that made it so we can become the country we are now, even though that wasn't the kind of country we were then.
Yeah.
And I think that there's genius in that. And so that to me is what makes him, my favorite. It's tight though, because I also love Alexander Hamilton, and the two of them were at odds on everything. So,
but I think that's a great point that you made. Is the genius is the idea, just to break that down, is the thoughtfulness of not thinking of what is now, but what could be later.
Yeah.
In the idea of, like you say, for the words that were written for the Declaration and for the Constitution, it's almost as if, like, when we say founding fathers, like, oh yeah, they founded the country. What they're doing though is ingenious, because they're thinking about what democracy could be for years and years. Yeah. It wasn't just necessarily what is now, which is often usually the expectations of the government in that moment when things are changing. That's a good point.
Well, and Jefferson's a very human founding father. There's a lot of criticisms to be made of him as a person, but the legacy of his work is really the thing that makes him stand out to me.
And that's important, because at the end of the day, too, it's tabloids. Like Marilyn Monroe did a lot of work, but here this one Brett's brought up is like whether or not she was pregnant.
Yeah.
Coffee talk. Moving on here is 1983, April 13th, 1983. Harold Washington was elected as the first African-American mayor of Chicago.
Wow.
Yeah, as 1983, and it took Chicago. Yeah, I can see that, some years. But yeah, that was on this date. That it's crazy, because when you read that, it's like, well, that was some years. That was over 35 years ago. But at the same time, it's like, man, in the 80s, it's kind of crazy.
Well, the 80s, it's like it took a while to get there. The 80s, that's a long time after the civil rights movement. Chicago was a hotbed for redlining and all kinds of kind of racialized issues. And so, it took until the 80s to finally have that kind of representation.
Incredible. As we move on to the last one, as we're coming to the bottom of the 10 o'clock hour here, this one's a good note that I like to end on. And this I actually watched again last week. If you listened to our segment with Galen, it's what I talked about last week, as we had no Masters tournament this year, the golf tournament that everybody looks forward to in the spring.
Everybody looks forward to.
Yeah, who's a fan of golf, rather. And it's being postponed towards, I think the idea is November now. But they were playing some of the rewind of the Masters, and it was on this date, April 13th in 1997, that 21-year-old Tiger Woods became the youngest ever to win the Masters tournament. He finished 18 under par, 270, and it's incredible because It was the lowest score ever shot during the Masters, and it's the most strokes any golfer has ever beat anybody at the Masters, and he was 21 years old, the youngest golfer to win the Masters. Not the youngest to win a major, but the youngest to win the Masters, and he obliterated the field.
That's the green jacket, right?
That is. Obliterated the field. Just
wow. And
that was the beginning of an era, which is pretty unique. Pretty unique nonetheless.
So you're a big golfer?
I am. It's my second passion behind flying.
My dad loves to golf. He actually got to play in the U.S. Amateur with Tiger Woods when Tiger Woods was playing when he was really young. That was one of his first big tournaments that Tiger played in. My dad played with him. Isn't that cool?
That is incredible. So your dad was a good golfer.
My dad's an excellent golfer, yeah. He's won the Marion Masters.
Yeah.
Not quite the same thing.
That's awesome. So he still golfs?
My dad? Yeah, oh yeah. He golfs all the time. He loves to golf.
Yeah,
so.
He's in the right place for it. Well, I got a new
my
connection.
My brother golfs with him. He's teaching my little nephew how to golf. We were just golfing in my yard last night.
Awesome. Yeah. See, that's pretty good. Now, like I said, I picked it up later. I mean, some people say that's probably a good age of when I picked it up. I was in high school, and I'm thankful that I did, because then I got to play competitive golf at the high school level, and then ever since then I've been trying to do something with it. I love it. It's a passion. I don't understand why, because it's one of the most cruelest games in the world.
But it's good for you. You're out there walking.
It's just you versus nature in a gentlemanly sense.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, that wraps up On This Day in History for our segment there. Stay tuned. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be rounding out the show. And I got some stuff, a little controversial stuff I think we're going to throw out there online, but I won't keep it too pertinent to it. You're listening to WOCA Ocala. Back after this.
Chris Foster. Economic stimulus payments passed by Congress as part of the coronavirus outbreak response have started hitting Americans' bank accounts.
People who haven't used e-file for their tax returns can expect to see paper checks starting next month. The checks are based on income, with those making less than $75,000 getting $1,200 per person, $2,400 per couple, and $500 per child. Checks are smaller for those with higher incomes, phasing out at $99,000.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland, a sailor infected on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt aircraft carrier, has died. At least 18 people are reported killed in violent weather in the South. Hundreds of homes are damaged in Louisiana through the Tennessee-Georgia border. Fox meteorologist Janice Dean says,
"We've had over 50 reports of tornadoes over parts of the South and the Gulf Coast. As we move forward, this storm system moves across the Southeast, parts of Florida and Georgia."
America's listening to Fox News.